Thank you for joining us tonight for our Bible study. It's good to hear the chatter of folks catching up with each other and seeing what's going on. And I suppose probably this time of year, everybody just kind of stays home until they come to church. And then it's like, I got somebody to tell everything that happened the last 3 days. But anyway, great to see everybody. We're going to be in the book of Ecclesiastes here in just a minute. We're going to be in actually the last chapter. We're going to be in chapter 12 here in just a moment. Briefly introduce this Sunday morning, just real snippet of the beginning of chapter 12 on Sunday. Really want to bridge it for you a little bit tonight before we get digging too far into the discussion of chapter 12. Interesting part, right? Because if we hadn't been in the study of the book of Ecclesiastes and I just walked into this room and I said, quote me a verse out of the book of Ecclesiastes, where would you go? Right where we're at, right? You would go to verse 1 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12. That's what you would do, right? Because it's the most familiar of the verses in this narrative, although you might think about some of the vanity of vanity texts and things like that as well. But we'll get into this here in just a moment. But anyway, great to see everybody. We'll study this together here in just a moment. But before we do that, if you would, let's bow our heads together and let's share in a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you for loving us and caring for us in the way that you do. Thank you for allowing us to assemble here, to open our Bibles together and to appreciate the testimony from your word this evening. Thank you again for this great book of wisdom that helps us understand how we should view this world in which we live, how we should appreciate that every good thing comes from you, and that we should be very cautious about how much faith and stock and confidence we put in earthly things, and that all of our trust and faith should be in you. Strengthen us in our study tonight. Encourage us in every righteous endeavor. And we pray this through thy Son's name. Amen. All right, so before we get back into verse 1, I think I really should do something. I want to back you up. Because, again, and I remind us as Bible students, did the writer of Ecclesiastes sit down one day and go, the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 1, and start writing? No, he just wrote it, right? He just wrote it. And then later, translators, and when they put copies of the Bible together, translators began to decide where the division breaks were. And there's a very practical reason for that. Anybody know the practical reason, by the way? That's easy to find, right? It's a very practical reason why the books were broken down into chapters and verses. It helps you find it quickly. And so it wasn't something that the original writers did. It's something that happened as the translations would occur, and it was basically a study aid. It was an ability to be able to quickly find the text. Now, I say all that to tell us, I think they made a mistake. I don't think they should have stopped. I believe that either there should have been just 11 chapters. I believe that the thought process hasn't stopped. And so if you break it, you might not fully grasp why he says, remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth, before the evil days come and the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. We can maybe misunderstand that if we don't go back and at least for a moment recall what he said prior to that. Right? We talk about that in Bible study all the time. Context, 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 right? That's how we draw the right conclusions about what's being written. You understand the context in which it was said. So let's go back, and then I'm going to ask you that question I asked at the end of Sunday morning study. But let me read a little bit of chapter 11 to you before redo that. So remind yourself. Let's start in verse 9 of chapter 11. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from thy heart, and put away evil from thy flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. See how the flow hasn't stopped? And so he's talking to younger people, right? He's talking to this group of people that are younger than the writer, obviously. And he's right, he's talked a lot in the book. Here's what happens when you pursue this, and here's what disappointments lie ahead if you forget about God, and right, all those things that we've studied. And so then he comes at the end of this messaging, and I don't want to say he's given up on old people, but the truth is, if you're 75, 80 years old, the time to learn these things have kind of what? They slipped by you, right? It's not that you couldn't benefit from it. It's much more profitable if you can learn these things well before 75 or 80, right? And that's what he's saying. Remember now, if you want joy in your life, then if you want to rejoice and do that in all your days, then remove sorrow from your heart. Put away evil from your actions, right? That's what he said at the end of chapter 11. Here's what you need to avoid, and then here's what you need to do. What you need to do is remember the Creator. Now, I asked you, I have a secondary question I really want to ask, which I should probably ask first, but I asked you a different one Sunday, so I'll start there. But so it says, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. And my question for you Sunday was, what's the them of verse 1? Okay, verse 9 of chapter 11. Okay, maybe. Not where my mind went, but fair enough. Okay, so what? Let me ask this: at the end of when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. And by the way, before I get too far here, for any English, like. I don't think we have any English. We got lots of... you do some English teaching, don't you? Notice anything interesting about the first 6 verses? In most English translations? It's all one big old sentence. Verse 1 through verse 6 of chapter 11 is one big old sentence. It doesn't stop. He barely breathes in the conversation. It's just one, and wouldn't you like to diagram that? Remember, anybody have to do that in school, diagram a sentence? I like to see dog run. I can do that one. Right? But here's this great big long statement that he makes. After the encouragements, right? After the encouragements of how it is you can find joy, but don't wreck it with bad decision making and poor choices and the difficulties. Don't create extra challenges for yourself. Get rid of the sorrow from your heart. Get rid of the evil that's going to create the things that take away the joy in your life. You do that then by remembering the Creator in the days of thy youth, before the evil days come not, nor the year draws all nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. I'm gonna go with the idea that I think he's talking about the days of your life. Remember your Creator when you're young, in the days of your youth. Why? Because the evil days are what? They're coming, right? They're coming. And we all probably experience those things. There's no chronologically magical age where it happens for everybody, right? But they're coming. And you've heard me say that the writer writes from a very cynical worldview, if we're allowed to use that phrase, right? He comes at what he's seen with very cynical eyes. He's seen oppression. He's seen rulers that don't serve justice. He's seen death come tragically to the innocent, and life prolonged for the guilty. And right, he's seen it all, and he's become very cynical about the world. Vanity of vanity, saith the preacher, all was vanity. I believe into chapter 11 through chapter 12, he's teaching us how to avoid the cynicism. He's trying to explain to us, how do I go through my days then and not become like you, Solomon? I don't want to become an older man looking back on life with nothing but jaded thought processes and frustration. And how do I avoid that? And what I love about what he does here, and again, we're drawing some speculative conclusion at Solomon, but I think that's how he ends the book. He's now telling us, okay, you want to avoid, so if you want to have some joy in life, if you want to find some days that are good and you want to avoid that cynical view where every day is just as rough and ugly as the one before it, here's how you do it. Yeah, you remember the Creator. I find that interesting too, by the way. Could he have said, remember your God? Sure, could have said that. Could he have said, remember the Lord? Sure, right? He could. But it's not exactly what he said, is it? He said, remember the Creator. Why? How does that strengthen us? How does remember the Creator, that specific description of God, how does that, in light of this conversation, how does it benefit a younger person as it relates to this conversation?
Faith really lies, is knowing who created.
Okay, right. So our faith, and you've heard again me say this before, our faith is founded on Genesis 1:1, right? What's that say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Why Genesis 1:1? Why is that so crucial to faith and conviction?
Everything else that follows depends on God being the creator.
Okay.
That's the foundation.
Okay.
If that's not true, then why do we believe the rest?
Okay. So, and all that's right? It's the foundation. It's that basis by which our faith is being built. If Genesis 1:1 isn't true, then none of it's true. Then none of it's true. Over the years, I've heard a lot of conversations about how important is the Genesis account of creation, right? And that had created some stir for a while among some circles, and some said, well, it's irrelevant to my salvation what I conclude about creation. But my thought process, no. I think what we conclude about creation is vital to our salvation, because if we can't get Genesis 1 right, if we can't get the very beginning, the foundational principles of God create, so it's crucial. And I think the writer here is trying to make sure we understand this is crucial. You want to know how to avoid all of that sorrow and frustration and just looking at the world is just nothing but an empty pit of darkness all the time. You want to avoid that? There's one way to do it. And it's you remember where you came from. Remember how you got here. Remember who's the sustainer of all things that was created. I thought it was interesting when he said, remember the Creator, not just remember God.
Something I do a day where I'm overexhausted, or I feel like just going to sleep or whatever, and I just need a refresher. I will sit and focus on something that he did create. That he did create.
Yeah.
Like my favorite's looking at the sky. I mean, it's just unbelievably amazing. Or the trees when they're changing the colors or something like that. It really hones in on,
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that So when, and get grounded in that. I think that's what he's trying to say. Get grounded in that idea as quick as you can, because the evil days are coming, right? The temptation to get stuck in the darkness is on its way. And nobody, he's been very clear in the book, right? Nobody eludes that. Nobody gets to escape that. Rich, poor, nobleman, inconsequential, everybody has to deal with it at some point or another. And so best to go ahead and get as grounded as we can in our convictions about who we are, how did I get here, who the Creator is. And the faster I build those convictions, the easier it is to deal with the evil days when they do come nigh. Go ahead, Bob.
He's making a comparison between the youth and an older person. So you got to figure out, what is the difference? The youth has just been created. He's young. This is how God created him. As you get older, the creation diminishes.
Yeah.
You go into the dark days of your old age.
Yeah.
And this is not what he created, but this is what has been developed in the older person. So he's wanting the young person to remember how it was when he was created, when he was young.
Yeah. Yeah. Not in the declining form, which is what he's going to talk about here in just a minute, that is coming to anybody who lives long enough, right? And at that.
Also, the things, he's talking about, it's pretty much just where they came from the Creator, because they were just created. I feel it's one of those things that you could still, you can still remember the Creator even when you're at that declining age, because knowing this is where I came from, a lot of the problems with the Pharisees were they thought, okay, I came from Abraham, right? I came from the patriarchs. But they kept forgetting where they truly came from was from God. So that's not just the youth. I feel like it could also be applied to
Well, it does, and he's trying to say learn it quick so that when you are older, when this process starts, you won't forget him as well. Go ahead, Lori.
You don't have your foundation in Genesis 1:1, and you don't believe that. Then it starts taking you down paths that it confuses your mind. You're trying to find explanations for this and this and this, and you really can't, or if you do, it's just so bogus.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It all unravels without Genesis 1. It all, right? And that's why it's so important for us to that's the starting place. That's the starting place. Go ahead, Randy.
Another aspect is the Creator, He's the designer of each one of us. How we think, how we do everything.
Yeah.
He's done everything.
Yeah.
So we need to think on that, very much so, because He knows best for us.
Yeah.
He designed us.
Right, and that's a great point, Randy, because the really throughout the entirety of the book, the writer keeps saying, listen, I tried to figure out life through every avenue there was. And I pursued wisdom of all types, kinds. And every time I did, it came back empty until I refocused my mind on God. And I think you're right. There's only one source of real wisdom here, and get focused on it. And that's where the strength's going to come from. Go ahead, Pam.
When you remember your creator in the days of your youth, you're setting a basis for a lifestyle for any age. How you treat people, study of the Bible, just every phase of your life.
Yeah. You're establishing, hopefully, habits, for lack of a better word, habits and patterns about your approach to life and about your approach to your understanding of the Creator and all those things. And the earlier the better. And let me add, the earlier the better in terms of drawing. I don't mean my own conclusions in the sense that I'm writing the narrative, but to get my own faith and convictions in those things. Anytime I talk to in parenting type studies, I'll remind myself and others that right, that's my job as a parent, is to do the best I can to teach and instruct and to guide and help my children to develop their own convictions about Genesis chapter 1. Not just borrow mine till they're 18 and go do something else then, but to really build their own in their youth.
You can do that early.
Yeah.
Wait till they're 16
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah, it starts.
You have to set the trend early.
Yeah, and it's interesting, well, I'd chase this rabbit hole tonight, but I always tell dads, it's interesting, and that, you know, when you're raising your children, it's hard for them to conceptually, at a really young age, to understand God, right? I mean, I know some adults that are still trying to get their mind around that, right? And so, but what they do know, though, is there's this great big guy that lives in the house, and he's in charge, right? They understand authority, they understand, and so you're beginning to build an understanding of how they build a relationship with God and how they build a relationship with their Father in some ways as well. So anyway, that's free. You can take it if you want. So there's the warning, right? Before the evil days come, when you just become a cynical old man, like the writer, and then he starts, right, with the comparison Bob referenced a little bit ago. Then he starts, and I don't. If you wanted a summary of the next 5 verses, getting old stinks, right? That's what he says. That's my West Virginia ease, but that's what he said. It does, because generally speaking, as you age, things just don't go well, right? The body is not meant to be, this temporal one is not meant to be forever. It's created with life and vitality that is intended to age and eventually decline. And what's the writer say over and over again? Die, right? That's just the fact. So here's how he describes it. While the sun or the light, or the moon or the stars, be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. What do you think he's describing? What kind of aging process do you see there? Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I don't see so well anymore. My eyes don't work as well as they used to. Did it? Wow. Well, get your own Bible. Did it go out? Out? Give it a second. That's weird. I've seen it do a lot of things. All right, who brought an IR remote in here and starting to mess with my stuff? It actually turned off, so it must be my computer. But I'm still in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, if you don't have your own Bible up. And I'm in verse 3 now. So, and it'll eventually come back up here in a second, I hope. So he continues to describe, and just give me 2 seconds, and I'll send it back up there. Disconnected for some reason. There we go. All right. Back up there now? Okay. Technology is so great. All right. That's probably what it tried to do before. It's what disconnected. Okay. So then in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, when your legs don't hold you up like they once did, and the strong men shall bow themselves. It's hard, isn't it? Yeah. And if you ever seen men, sorry ladies, I'll make it an analogy right now, but that just in their youth they could take on a bear, right? And then age comes along and they don't have the same strength as they once did. Their body even shrinks. I've told you, and I don't think he would mind me telling this story, but and if he does, I'll edit it out later. But I've told a lot of you all about, I won't name him, but there's a preacher friend of mine, and you see me wear a lot of suits. Got them all from him. I've got about I think seven or eight suits, 4 or 5 sport coats, all from this same preacher. And the reason why he gave them to him is he couldn't wear them anymore because they're too big. He shrunk. As age came along, he just began to shrink. He wasn't as big as he once was. Literally, height-wise, just shrunk. Just wasn't the same. And that happens, right? The body ages, and it's just not the same strength that it once had. The grinders cease. You don't have as many of those maybe as you once did, or maybe they're not even yours, right? You got them at a store, right? You don't chew, and some of you met Deborah's dad. I always think about him when I think of chewing. Deborah's dad had polio when he was young, and survived that. But it left a couple of lasting effects on him, and one of them was his inability to really chew, and so he'd hold his chin so that he could move his jaw enough to be able to chew. And anyway, right? You just can't. You don't chew things. You don't dare take on that untender steak anymore, right? You have to think about. So he's just talking about what happens as you get older. The grinders cease because you don't have as many as you once had. As those that look out of the windows be darkened, that same idea that the blinders come up, right? You don't see as well. You don't chew as well. You don't stand as well. You can't work as hard. You can't, and it's just a warning that if you live long enough, it's coming. And even some folks that were just a hulk of a human being really late in their lives, still eventually it comes. The door shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. So lots of thoughts, processes, depending on how you read, but potentially the idea here that the doors are shut. What's that generally mean? You're not what? You're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. The doors are now shut. What was once open and where you would come and go pretty freely, now you got to think more about how you travel and where you go and when you go. Right? The doors are shut. The sound of the grinding is low. The hustle and bustle and work that would be going on typically around you. And it's interesting. He says, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird. Now, I generally used to think about that as just that you what? To bed early and up early. Which I'm only 56 years old, and that's already me. But I was reading some other things about that today. And, say it again, Chris. Okay, so you startle easily, right? We use a phrase. Sometimes somebody that's just sound asleep, we say they're what? Well, okay. All right, I'll see you all. I'm out. I'm dead to the world. That's Ecclesiastes, though, I guess. But no, we say they're sleeping like a baby. Why? Because the baby doesn't have a care in the world. The baby doesn't have a care in the world. Everything it needs is being done for it, right? The baby doesn't lay awake at night worrying because it doesn't know that there's anything to worry about. But as you get older, not so much, right? I mean, how many of us over the age of 40 haven't just laid awake at night looking at the ceiling with 60 billion things going through our heads trying to, and I'm not saying only 40-year-olds either, by the way. I'm sure younger people might have those experiences as well, but that's part of the aging process. You don't sleep as soundly anymore. You don't get up and go like you once did. And it's interesting, this phrase, voice of the bird, I should have wrote it down. I did at home just so I thought if I wrote it down once it would click in my head. But anyway, there's another biblical reference. I'll try to remember to write it down for Sunday. But the idea is not necessarily that you get up at the voice of the bird, that early, but your voice is like that of and I'll find that text for you Sunday, but your voice isn't as strong and powerful. And I think that segues a little bit because he says, and all the daughters of music, right? Have you ever just like turn on the television, or maybe you've gone to a concert, and it's like your favorite band from when you were 15, and they're playing, and they come out with walkers, and they go to sing, and you're like, oh, wow, right? There's a reason why. If you notice those groups, there's a reason why they always end up eventually hiring some young guy, and he'll sing most of the lead stuff, and then the original guys will just kind of fill in. Why is that? Because as they age, their voice just doesn't work like it did before. Yeah, they can't, right? I'm just trying to give you a visual picture here of what he's talking about. You don't sing like you once did. Your voice doesn't work like it once did. You don't chew food like you once did. You don't run like you once did. You don't. And then you die. So remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Because that's what's coming, and you're going to need the Creator. I'm not saying young people don't need the Creator. What I'm saying is if we don't appreciate in youth the need for the Creator, when the evil days come and the years draw nigh and I don't run as fast and I don't chew as well and I don't see as well and I don't hear as well and I don't sing as well and the age is all catching up to me, I'm going to look for some form of help, right? I'm going to want some refuge. I'm going to want some strength. I'm going to want some encouragement. And I want to know when I get to that point in my life who it is I'm going to turn to. I'm going to turn to the Creator that I have known from my youth. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to trust in the Creator who I've put my faith in since youth. And I've got to get that etched in my mind before all this starts of what I'm going to rely upon all the days of my life, particularly when those difficult ones come.
The days of your youth before those days are gone.
Yeah. Because youth doesn't stay around long. It doesn't stay around long. It feels like it will. It feels like it will. And I try not to be overcritical, and I don't want any young person to go, oh, he's always picking on young people. I think that's silliness. But I'm just telling you straight out. Ron and I used to be in high school, right? Ron and I both were in high school once, and roughly at the same time. And now we're not, right? Now we're not. And so just be mindful that it comes, and it comes at us quickly. Verse 5, he keeps going. When they shall be afraid of that which is, they're afraid of what's high, right? They don't want to, they don't want to climb that. Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to take responsibility for that. But there's some others in this room, by the way, that shouldn't be climbing on ladders either. But I'll leave those people out of it. But anyway, right? But you generally speaking, and fear shall be in the way. Older people tell me, I'm not quite with you yet, but you ever have those experiences where something that once didn't bother you at all and now just puts a little anxious feeling about something, you know what I mean? Things that you didn't even, 25, 35, 40 plus years ago, you would have just done it. Wouldn't have thought about it, wouldn't have bothered you, wouldn't have, and now you're like, maybe not, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Yeah, well, it could be. It could be just you're smarter now too, maybe too.
I didn't used to be afraid to come on the roof of our house.
Yeah.
And now I'm not allowed. But
But
the worst part for me, not getting up there, but
getting
getting down.
down, yeah.
Get hold of the ladder and
Yeah.
it's not fun.
Yeah. Well, and it's not the fall; it's always the landing too. So I don't be careful. But right, that's the idea though. And then what happens? The almond tree shall flourish. Now, some of y'all cheat, but generally speaking, the hair doesn't stay as dark, and right. The almond tree flourishes, and the grasshopper shall. Yeah. Will is clueless, but right. Even the grasshopper's a burden. Desire shall fail. It's like, Deborah and I aren't that old, but you will look and what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Right? And you just, right? You just, the gumption that you once had, he's just talking about all these things that happen. And then here we go. Then you go to your long home. So I know you're sitting there, and there's several young people in the room, and you're going, "Wow, that's what's coming, right? That's what I've got to look forward to. My legs aren't going to work. My teeth are going to fall out. I'm not going to be able to see anything. My hair's going gray. And then I die?" Yeah. But along that way, you can rejoice in them all if you remember a Creator. Isn't that what he's saying? If you can rejoice, O young man, in right? In the days of your youth. Follow the thought of your heart and the ways of your eye. But know thou that God will bring you into judgment. So remove sorrow from your heart. Put away evil from your body. Remember your Creator. And then enjoy and rejoice in all of your days. Because even when you can't walk as well, talk as well, sing as well, see as well, hear as well, you'll still have the strength of the love of God with you every step of the way. how you live life under the sun so that it won't be vanity of vanities. That's how you pursue a life of joy and contentment and happiness and peace. You put the Creator as the primary and everything. And then when life comes at you fast, you'll have the greatest refuge and strength supporting you through all of that. Lord willing, I'll come back. So we've set the stage. There's not much left, by the way, here in this book. We'll wrap up fairly quickly. I'll probably share with you Sunday a little bit of what the plan for this class. We're going to do something a little different coming up fairly soon. I got to iron out a couple of details before I tell you exactly how all that's going to work. And so, rather than tell you and then backtrack it, I want to make sure we clear it all up. But we're going to do some things differently, not necessarily, but in terms of who's up here.